Hey folks, Al Reese here with RX Athletes, helping you get stronger, fitter, faster in the world of functional fitness. And today we've got actually a unique guest because we haven't actually probably had a conversation one-on-one. However, we've shared similar competitions and fitness events, competing on different teams and against each other throughout probably the best part of 10 years now. I think there's going to be a good conversation to be had here because one, we don't know each other to a familiarity with how we train and how we coach, but I think there's going to be similarities about what we both prescribe in terms of training for athletes and obviously what we do with ourselves. We're probably around about the same age as well. So there's going to be a unique perspective from each, but I reckon across the board, there's going to be some similar things to take away. So I'll go in first. Amir, do you want to introduce yourself? Just give us 30 seconds about what you're kind of up to at the moment, how your training's going.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Amir. Like Alex said, we've competed on the CrossFit circuit for a long time. Like I tell everyone that I'm a CrossFit OAP. I've started in 2012, so this is my 12th year now of CrossFit. Competed pretty much from day one. Like I came from a rugby background, so I was a very highly competitive individual getting into it. So as soon as someone told me you could do competitions, I was like, yeah, sold, let's go. I have always worked in the fitness industry, so I compete at a relatively high level in the sports field just as a master, and I'm a coach. So I have a full online business called Strength Season, where I help athletes get stronger, gain gymnastic skills, and also compete in the sport.
Amazing. And again, just thinking about that, 2012 is actually probably about the same time when I started. I think it was that time where CrossFit really started hitting the map. And those first years with Rich Froning, and you still have some of the OGs like Chris Spealler, and the CrossFit Games was really exciting back then. And I think I was inspired by what they were doing. And although I wasn't coming from rugby, I was coming from this sort of military background where I thought I was quite fit. And then I went to a box and got my ass handed to me by some sort of 50-year-old, just dominating me, and I couldn't even know red squat a broomstick. And you start realizing when you first go into a CrossFit box, or certainly back then anyway, because it was kind of new to everyone, and everyone's walking around with their tops off, and you're like, "The fuck is going on around here?" It's sort of crazy atmosphere. But then you sort of get into it and you sort of love it and you fall in love with the stuff. But I can definitely relate to how it's sort of evolved since that time. 10 years then, or 12 years, so to speak, you pick up a lot of stuff, you pick up a lot of experience in terms of how to train. How would you say your training is sort of looks compared to it was 12 years ago, now that you know what you know?
Yeah, yeah, you're totally right. I think it's exactly like you said. It's the evolution of the sport is insane over the last 12 years, and I think we used to have, and it's funny you mentioned like Chris Spealler as an example, and like Josh Bridges and those guys. I love like the OG CrossFit Games crowd. You used to have specialists, like you used to get away with being like, oh, this guy's an amazing gymnast. Maybe they can't lift as heavy, and that's like the Chris Spealler example, right? Or this person's super, super strong. They're amazing at weightlifting, but they're just not quite as fit as the rest. And my training has really changed based on the CrossFit athletes that exist now that are just like cyborg that can do everything. Do you know what I mean? It's insane. So my start in the sport was I was very much a strong guy. I played rugby to a decent level. I'd messed around in strength and conditioning, and I couldn't like Olympic lift. I didn't have like the technique, but I remember within 6 to 12 months, I think I power clean like 120 just through like pure no front rack, no technique. My legs splitting like wider than the platform, but I could get the bar up. And for a long, long time in the early part of my career, I really relied on my strength to get me through and just kind of like long weights up and down. And the fact that I could generally, if there was a weightlifting event, I probably knew, okay, for me, this is going to be like a top 10 finish or a top 10% finish in whatever competition I'm in. And then slowly over the last few years, the weightlifting weights that I was literally winning events at have become like normal, have become like that everyone else can now all do this kind of stuff, repetitions. So I had this one major strength in my game and really didn't do much with gymnastics and fitness. I get beaten on workouts by the gymnasts and the fit people, and my training now is much more plugging the weaknesses in my game and becoming much more well-rounded, as opposed to focusing on, oh, I'll win the weightlifting event, but who cares if you win one event if you're going to come bottom 10% in the other 4 or 5, right? So I've been working to become a much more well-rounded individual, and that's, I think, the biggest thing I say to anyone that's coming into the sport. Is just, it's cool to have a thing that you like and maybe you're strong at comparatively to other people, but it doesn't matter if you come last in the thing that you're bad at. You really need to plug those holes in your game. So for me, my training is quite heavily biased towards like gymnastics and fitness now, because I know those are the things that comparatively are my weaknesses.
Amazing. And so many things. I'm nodding along here like a nodding dog, but it's just so obvious when you think about how it started. It was kind of like athletes moving from their sports into this thing, this world of elite fitness, or forging elite fitness, as they used to say. And then you had, like you said, the specialists, until 10 years later you now have got kids who've been doing it since they were like 5 years old. So they're not transitioned out of the sport. They've basically been doing this and training for this for their whole lives. And obviously with that comes just a better athlete, because they can do everything, right? And obviously back in the day, probably you talk about Matt Fraser, some of the sports lent themselves quite well to be going into CrossFit. You're a very good weightlifter. You had a good shot at just blending those movements into a lot of stuff. But it's funny, I was just listening to your story then, and I almost feel like I came from the opposite end of that spectrum, more on the really good at endurance, really, really good running, and pretty much weak in terms of just core strength, no sort of powerlifting experience. And I just relied on being able to be fitter than everyone else, do more burpees. And I've been doing it the opposite way, where I've been like, I just have to do loads of strength work in order to keep up. And that's probably, there's probably a bit of body type going into this here, where you naturally fall into your sort of general genetic makeup. I'm probably much more slow twitch, endurance based. So 70% of my training needs to be strength in order to just stay, maintain what I've currently got. So it's funny to hear that side of the story. In terms of like coming to realize the realization that you probably got to flip your weaknesses over your strengths and make them the priority. Is there any part leading up to a competition where you go, you know what, I'm going to go back down and swap it back around and go, I'm going to work on the strength numbers a bit more as well? When does that change, or is it just constantly always working the weaknesses? How does that evolution work in terms of like leading up to a competition?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, like, I'll never, obviously, in our sport, you need to be able to lift weights. There's pretty much like, I think every single comp I've ever been to has a strength event. Do you know what I mean? And then being stronger means you can shift a 60 kilo barbell faster. It probably means you can pull higher numbers on erg. So when I say that I bias my weaknesses, my program is still heavily like, I still have a big aspect of strength. It's just, I remember back in the day when I was either messing around or writing my own programs, because if you're good at something, you also want to do it in the gym. So my training program would be, when I started, I'd do a few classes. When I started to mess around in open gym, I just max out all the time. That was the thing that I liked doing. I wanted to feel good in the gym. So I'd be like, oh, might max out my power clean today. And then that would be like 4 days a week, basically. So for me, it's just a case of, I think of it as dials. Like I kind of have weightlifting, let's say 50% of my program might be weightlifting, and the other 50% is gymnastics and fitness. And then at any point, if I need to, I can dial things up, dial things down. But, I say that I'm a strength-based athlete. Like I mentioned a minute ago, like you said, you've got people that start CrossFit from out the womb, basically, and they're already stronger. Like you watch the strength numbers at semi-finals, at games, even at just national UK comps, it's crazy numbers that were just unheard of a few years back. So I still heavily weightlift. It's just there's much more bias for me on my gymnastics and conditioning, where it used to be like 80% weightlifting, and then if I wasn't knackered, I'd fit in a workout. Now I'm like, okay, this needs to change the priority.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, it's probably very similar then. So that's good to know. And also, probably reassuring to most people that it actually is quite simple in terms of, if you're saying 50% of your program's made up of lifting, then actually you've just defined the requirement to actually just work on your numbers, and repetitions being key, like progressive overload. Um, I'd probably say one caveat is I would do the strength stuff probably up to about 4 weeks, maybe six, depends on the comp, maybe 6 weeks out, and then I would try and start entering a sort of actually just pure CrossFit mode where I'm just putting them together, and the lifts are in the workouts, and I'm now doing touch and go reps, and I'm adding more volume into the movements, and I trying to
Yeah.
simulate more of the actual stuff you're going to be doing. Because I guess there's a certain point where you're like, okay, I'm not really going to get much stronger here, and if I do, it's not worth that sacrifice compared to the other elements I need to be focusing on now. And that gets sort of flipped around. And then obviously the skill elements become much more a priority, because you want to make sure that your movement execution is really good, as in like you're less
Yeah.
fatigued when you're carrying out muscle ups, when you're carrying out pistols. If you can reduce the resistance of the fatigue buildup, you're going to be in a much better place over a sustained period. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. Like when I say weightlifting, weightlifting in CrossFit is so broad. It's obviously you have maxing out, you have your compound lifts, you have touch and go reps, you have external objects like dumbbells, kettlebells, like anything is weightlifting. It's such a broad thing. The reason that I normally bias it in a lot of the people I trained program is because of the three things in CrossFit that we're trying to get better at, which generally is weightlifting, gymnastics, and conditioning. Normally, weightlifting is the person it's going to take the longest to develop over time in someone. Like I can bar and muscle up, right? I'm not amazing. I'm not like the best bar and muscle up person, but now I've achieved those skills. It's kind of increasing my capacity at them, just trying to do bigger sets and trying to blend those skills with other things so I get less tired. Where weightlifting's like this forever journey of you can always be stronger. Like you can always add kilos to your lifts. You can always improve your snatch, clean, and jerk technique. And the carryover that has to things we do in CrossFit is massive. There's always going to be moderate barbells, always going to be light barbells, always going to be dumbbells, kettlebells, things that if you're stronger at, you can shift better. So yeah, you're totally right in that the 50% weightlifting like part of my program might stay, but the type of weightlifting, just like you alluded to, will change to more touch and go reps, barbell cycling, lighter loads for higher repetitions versus the high risk stuff like maxing out your deadlift or your clean or your snatch, etc.
Yeah, amazing. And I think actually that the definition of what we're talking about, I was probably more talking about just specific weightlifting and powerlifting. But you just articulated exactly what I was trying to say really well. Um, there's one more caveat to this thing that I just want to dial into whilst we're on the subject, and it's how has all this looked? You know, has it changed at all since you've got older? We're both in the masters category now. 12 years in the making, you pick up a few things about how your body feels, and how much you can actually take in these things. Would you say it's changed at all? Do you need an extra rest day? How does that look?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think I just know my body a bit more now. Like, I probably have the same like total training volume in the gym, if that makes sense. But I will not not I won't exercise as intensely or hit the higher percentages as often. Do you know what I mean? I'm rarely maxing out my snatch clean and jerk. I'm rarely doing like super, unless I'm doing qualifiers or I'm actually competing. I'm not doing as much like high intensity, kill yourself CrossFit where in the early days I was chasing intensity like all the time. It was like the holy grail was, oh, can you make yourself like nearly pass out? Can you make yourself like nearly sick in the gym? Can you, can you absolutely ruin yourself doing this workout? Now it's not like that at all. The same amount of time spent in the gym, like the same training time, it's just lower intensity, lower percentages. The thing I'm really interested in, specifically with weightlifting, is like my minimum numbers. Like, no matter how my body feels, no matter what I'm doing in the gym, if I'm snatch or clean and jerking, can I hit like 90%, and can it be kind of okay, versus adding on an extra 5-10 kilos and chasing new maxes where I used to. And then the odd open category competition I've done in the last, like, I'm like I said to you, I turned 35. I'm about to turn 36 next month, so I'm like 35 and 11 months old. I've done 2 masters competitions, and then in the last year, because I'm still only just a master, I've still been doing like open age competitions, and I can kind of start to see the difference with recovery when I'm competing against like 21, 22 year olds that can just seem to like bounce back. And it's not that they can give more in a workout, it's just on like a competition where it's multiple events the same day. I can just tell I'm starting to get more fatigued than in my early 20s when I competed then, and just like could bounce back from anything. So I think it's just being a bit more intelligent with my training. And I think now I'm 12 years into the sport, I can look at a workout and I can know when I was 24, 25, I didn't know that this workout in front of me would cause me soreness for days. Where I can look at workouts now, understanding the sport, and being like, yeah, I'm not going to do this, or do you know what? I'm going to do it at like an 8 out of 10 effort, as opposed to the young me that would have killed myself doing Karen and then wouldn't be able to walk for like 3 days. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I completely relate to loads of that you just said. I feel I'm 37, by the way, so we haven't got much difference in us. I think you're right, and obviously there's always the inverse relationship between volume and intensity. More volume, less intensity, and so on and so forth. And I feel like as you get older, the extremities of how far you can push both of those things is just reduced. The box in terms of how much volume you can do and how much intensity you can do. So you can still
Yeah.
do intensity, but you just can't do as much. You can still do volume, you just can't do as much. And the big things I found is that you just have to be a bit clever with how long you decide to build up to a high intensity. Like, your cycle might just require a few more sessions, because obviously most of the time when you're working below a certain percentage is actually more neurological than it is physiological. Is you're building a movement pattern, you're giving your body a chance to learn a faster way to do an exercise. That's repetition. Now that can only come if you execute it to a perfect standard, or to a very good movement. Otherwise, you're not going to get that brain capacity. You're not going to be able to improve the speed, the quickness, and basically your technique. Once you have that, then you can start adding the load. And I think that just means you can have a longer sort of mesocycle, if you want to call it that. And I feel you just need to realize, as you get older, when you do those days where you're at high intensity multiple times a day, it's going to hit your body quite hard, and you're going to need to have a few days off. Like, I used to do a comp and be like back in next day, yeah, I'm good to go. Now I'm like much more aware of more the CNS. I might feel good, but I realize that the body needs to recover, and it's sort of having that ego trip of just going, you know what, I'm just going to roll it out today. I'm just going to ride it out on the bike. I'm just going to gently get the body moving, and everything's just a lot more controlled, and I'm just a lot more. I kind of know my body at this point. So that's one of the benefits, I think. And going on to your last point there about knowing the workout is going to hurt and stuff, that there is kind of almost a little bit of a weakness there, where you are careful a little bit, where you probably used to go in a little bit more aggressively and be like, I'm just going to make myself die on this workout, and now you're a bit cautious because you know the pain, which is kind of a little bit of a weakness, and there's that fear factor. And I certainly have been caught out many times where I've let athletes like get ahead of me, because I've been like, oh no, it's all right, because I'm almost like being really cautious. So there's certainly that, mate. That's really good. And I think what I'm curious to know now, we've kind of touched on almost like that top end competing athlete, if I was a beginner, day one, week one, and we spoke about a few things, but what if I've never done CrossFit? What if I've just done some bro sessions in the gym? Maybe I'm just doing a park 5K run, and I just I'm unhappy with where this is going. I'm more like recreationally exercising more than anything, and I really want to just get into some training. Where do I start? I mean, let's say I can't go to a box, and I just want to start and see what it's about. What would be your advice on that?
Yeah, interesting one. Well, it's funny you mentioned not going to a box because, like, my first advice would be get to a box, right? But if that's something you literally can't do, like, we're lucky in the world now that there's just so much online. Like, you can find out. I'm on YouTube half the day just finding out new stuff. It's insane. Like, all the knowledge that we didn't have like 15, 20 years ago that you used to have to dig through like obscure journals or find online, or you felt like top end athletes were like holding back. It's all shared. So if you're unable to get a box, and I'm aware of like the irony of this, like being a coach myself, it would be get a coach. Like it's you probably need someone just to have a look at you doing stuff, mainly just the complicated stuff in the sport. The hardest step to do is to be like, get out your comfort zone and be like, okay, I'm gonna, like, for me as like a rugby bro who could kind of squat, bench, deadlift, the hard thing was being like, okay, I actually need to practice with a PVC pipe, because, and I was like a bit embarrassed at the time. I remember walking into a gym, the coach telling me to start overhead squatting a PVC pipe. I was like, why? I was like, I can squat like 130, 140 or something already. I was like, why are you having me use a PVC pipe? And then you're now a bit older and wise, and you realize, okay, you need to, like, the Olympic lifts can't just be, you can't just put 40 kilos in a bar and snatch it at first go. Well, you can, but it'll look like a car crash. So if I was an absolute beginner, I'd probably tell them to get in touch with some sort of person, because you could do with someone just looking at your movement, whether that's in person or online. Yeah, just seeking help somehow. If you're extremely self-taught, you probably could go back through the old CrossFit.com stuff, but it's probably the articles, like the early articles, are still great, but probably very outdated now. Like, CrossFit has evolved and changed as a sport. But it's just finding either a group of people, a community, or a coach that can help you in your like initial first steps. And then like the big thing that I just mentioned is like leaving your ego at the door. I was like 100 kilo, 6'2", rugby playing, started CrossFit at 24. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to win. I'm going to beat everyone. I'm going to crush this. And then found out the hard way that I was not crushing it at all. So just being humble, leaving at the door, and not being afraid to seek help.
I completely agree. And it sounds almost a bit, I don't know what the word is, unethical, because we're both coaches, so we're both prescribing what we want them to do. But all right, hypothetically, if you couldn't find a coach and you were just relying on YouTube, I think what you should focus on is really fundamental movement patterns, and that's what we're saying here. A coach is going to teach you how to move right, and if you do that to start with, it just saves a lot of, for want of a better word, unfucking later on. Because when you start doing these movements incorrectly, it takes a lot to break down what you've developed in your head to make you move more efficiently. So, if you're watching YouTube, do it slowly, take your time, make sure you're doing it correctly. And then I would follow some sort of classical 5-3-1 strength cycle. I just do that until I was strong enough. Now, if you're someone like Amir, you probably don't even need to get that strong because you're really strong already. But you definitely need to get your numbers up in order to, and like you said earlier, the base of what it gives you is not just a direct better squat. It gives you a stronger core. It gives you a stronger spine. Gives you it actually increases your potential for rate of force development. There's loads of things just by doing those compound lifts, which will transfer over later to just a better athlete. I always say there's almost like 3 things you need to do. One is do some sort of resistance training. Like I just said, strength work is probably going to be. Number 2, you probably need to do some sort of engine work. And that doesn't have to be CrossFit. That can be slow running, that could be on a bike. But generally, you want to work the cardiovascular system. It's part of a as part of the whole body, and you need to be able to work that as well. And I say the last one is probably like do stuff like a human being. Um, and bodybuilding kind of for all its good it's brought, that's probably one of its flaws, is that you're just moving in a two-plane motion. It's not how humans are meant to move. They're meant to move unilaterally, they're meant to move sideways, they're meant to rotate, they're meant to lunge. And if you're doing stuff like that, you're going to have more supple joints, you're going to have better connecting muscles, so synergists and the stuff that support the prime movers are going to be just more functional. And as you get older, these will become way more apparent. So those are the three things I'd say you can do. And that means if you're going to program for yourself, do some strength work, 5-3-1 or some sort of classical cycle. Number two, do some sort of engine work, regardless if it's just sitting on the bike or going for a run. Happy with that. And then last one, do some sort of accessory human-like movement for your joints. I know that was probably me going into more of an answer for the question. Was there anything you could add on to that?
No, it's funny that you mentioned it, because I ran, like, I'm a bit of a strength nerd. So in the transition for me from rugby to CrossFit, I ran starting strength, like Mark Ripperto, for months, like months and months and months. And like, it's the most boring training cycle you could ever do. It's like 2 workouts, A, B, and it's like 5x5 squats, 5x5 deadlifts. I think there's some like a bench press session, some chin ups. It's like the most basic training program that you could ever do. And someone would look at it, a beginner would look at it probably and be like, what's this? It's really unsexy. It's like not a cool program to follow anymore. But like, just as a newbie, the progressive overload gains you get are just phenomenal. And this year, it's like workout 1 on Monday, workout 2 on Wednesday, workout 1 again on Friday. It's like A, B, A, B, A. Like the weeks changed. Super boring, super effective. Like I messed around with starting strength. I did 5-3-1. I did strong list 5x5. Like I did a bunch of like just classic strength cycles in my last few years of rugby that have probably laid the foundations for me, that when I did walk into CrossFit, I power clean 120 within a few months because of just the basic compound foundations I had. So yeah, I just completely agree with that point you made.
Yeah. The next book to that, which is Programming for Performance, Mark Ripperto, is probably got about another 10 to 20 strength programs in it. Really good book. It's, I don't know, maybe 1980s, maybe 90s. But you can pick it up now. They got like version 5 or something. I don't know. Really good book, and it's just an evolution of that program. There's things for different sports as well. If you do MMA, if you do competitive American football, if you do rugby, there's other stuff into it, and it adds on to the strength element. So the next time it'd be like a power clean, and then it adds like a pull up, then it adds. So if you wanted to get to the next one, it's pretty good next step for that. But I think that's really helpful actually. I think I'll shift gears slightly now, because I realize there's one group in the middle we've kind of missed out. We might have got them somewhere, but if you were, let's say, now I'm talking, in the middle of 1 to 10. Let's say 10 being Matt Fraser, and number 1 we just talked about them, they're just getting started, or maybe on 0. What if you're around like 4 and you're doing well in the CrossFit classes, you're getting in the top of the leaderboard every day, you're pretty much RX everywhere. How do you then go, right, I want to compete in an individual comp? Because we know that to qualify these days takes a lot of effort than just doing well in the box. How would you say they should start looking at their training?
Yeah, two things. So like, well, 3 things actually. So number 1, competitions have evolved so much in the, like, I remember when you started as well. When I started, I would turn up to competitions because there were only a handful of competitions. We didn't have scaled intermediate, RX, and elite. There was no such thing as a category. Like you just entered the competition and you competed against the people that were there. So I think now, if you're a beginner, there are like actual catered competitions for your level. You can enter the scale comp. You can see exactly what you're expecting. You can enter maybe something in house. So there's lots more opportunity if you want to. And this is like a blessing and a curse. You can compete so often now. When I started CrossFit, there was only a couple of competitions a year, so everyone turned up to the 4 big competitions in 2012 because there was only 4, okay, outside of like in-house ones. Number 2 would be like, we both mentioned the like unethical part of it, but again, just getting a coach. Like, I remember my early years being so headstrong and kind of blunt in that, no, I can program for myself, I can do all this. And I literally remember trying to take like what Matt Fraser was saying about weightlifting and what Froning was saying about conditioning and what Invictus was saying about gymnastics, and creating this like, yeah, I'm going to create this like cyborg Terminator program. I'll be the best CrossFit athlete ever made. Which now I say out loud is the stupidest thing that you could ever do, right? But I remember trying to piece together this whole thing, and it's just it uninherently, you don't know it. You have biases in your own program as an athlete. You want to work on the things you're good at. Like I touched on, for me, it was weightlifting. I'd weightlift all the time because it was a thing that gave me like, endorphins. It was a thing I enjoyed. It was things I was good at. So I'd see good results and I'd enjoy it more. But for me to perform well as an athlete, I didn't need to lift as much as I could. And just having a coach can give you an unbiased view of your training, an outside view, like can see you as an athlete and can figure out what you need, as opposed to you trying to figure it out yourself. If you're trying to do building work in your house, right, you'd hire an expert builder who would know exactly what to do. I wouldn't try and YouTube how to like start laying bricks because I do a fucking terrible job. So it's hiring someone that's already got the knowledge that you're kind of after to help impart that on you. And the third and final one is like training partners. I think training partners are so big. There's definitely a conversation about how they can also be a detriment. Like, you shouldn't be competing 110% intensity every single day with your training partners. But if you can start to replicate like a mini competition environment in your gym, then that can be a great thing for your training. Like, I remember really fondly in my formative years of CrossFit, there were 2 lads, like still friends with them to this day, even though we've all moved on, who we did similar class times, and I would get to the gym and look for their names on the whiteboard and be like, okay, he's got this time, I'm going to chase it. And just that competitive nature made us all better because we were all trying to beat each other, if that makes sense. And if you are a 4 out of 10 competitor who wants to improve, then you probably want to be chasing people's times in the gym and actually trying to compete, as opposed to just like go through the motion. So yeah, the 3 things that I mentioned is getting a coach, training partners, and then just, we're lucky in this day and age now in that there is a lot of competitions, so you probably can find the ones that are right for you. And competing is something that I'm like a huge fan of, and I believe everyone should go through, mostly because you'll get more data about yourself as an athlete. Like, a cheesy quote that I normally tell people is like, the leaderboard doesn't lie. Like, you've got exact placings of how you've done in different modalities, and then for your next competition in 6 months' time, you know exactly what you need to work on, what's dragged you down the leaderboard, what you've done well at, and you can use that data to inform your next training program.
Yeah, I love that. I'd add some caveats to it. I'd say that you're just gonna have to acknowledge and accept that your box programming isn't going to be enough. General physical preparedness is not going to progress you quick enough or enough in order to compete. You can do local comps and you can probably do team events, probably, because it's not all reliant on you. But if you wanted to actually qualify for competitions, you're going to have to do progressive overload. You're going to have to target specific weaknesses, and you can only do that if you have independent programming. Now, group programming can do that. It will probably take longer because you have to stay on it long enough to pick up the weaknesses. You stay on it, and you pick up, and eventually you become basically everyone. You become the same level as everyone on the program over time. That's the theory with it. Obviously, having a coach would just mean that we can just work out, right, where are you right now? Where's your point A? Where do you want to be? Where's your point B? And then the bit in the middle is the program, right? And we can go, right, you're really far off on this bit. You're actually pretty close on that bit. And then you structure the program to target the biggest deficits. And really, it's as simple as that. If you've got a good enough coach, he's going to be able to target them really well, and you're going to get the gains you want, and you're not going to get injured. If he's not, and he's just giving you loads of stuff, then it might work for a week or two. and then you'll probably either one get fed up with it or two get injured. So just bear that in mind. Make sure you do your research. I'd say the other one is
So,
that. Go on, mate. Go on.
I was just going to piggyback on that because, like, you made such a great point, and this is something that I talk about all the time online. In that, just in our day and age of information being freely available, like for some reason, and it's the last 2-3 years I've noticed it. Like every man and their dog wants to be a CrossFit coach and puts it in their bio and puts online coach in their bio when they've probably done their CF level 1 last week on a good day. Some of the bad coaches completely unqualified. They just think that because they're semi-okay about fitness, they can coach. And I just encourage anyone, like, you should be able to ask someone you're considering coaching with or someone that coaches you, just, hey, like, what's your experience? What's your background? What are your qualifications? And they should be able to give you like a good answer to that question. And it's not intrusive. It's something that they should be able to answer, like, hey, like, I've been in the game for this long, I've done these things, I have these qualifications, this is my background. And I can imagine that if you asked a lot of these new like CrossFit coaches or a lot of the new online coaches online, their answer to that question would be not so great.
Yeah, we live in an influencer world at the moment. There was one thing I was going to say at the end of that, and that was the second part to obviously, identifying that you probably going to need a separate program, either group or some sort of coaching, different programming, definitely, is that you're going to have to accept that it's going to take some sacrificing. And the further you go up within this journey, and you can go as far as you want, right? If you're young enough, you could go all the way. The further you go up, the more sacrifice you have to make. And you cannot expect to be the same person where you are right now as where you were if you would get to level 7. It ain't going to work like that. If you look at all the level 7, level 8 athletes, and I'm saying that because they're going to be the guys that are qualifying for comps. They might not be at the games. They will be living a different life than you. What I mean is they're going to be in the gym probably 2-3 hours a day. They're probably not drinking alcohol. They're probably watching what they eat. They're probably sleeping. They're probably not playing PS5 for 9 hours. And I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but I'm being serious now. If you want to go to the next stage, there's almost a level of acceptance, and it's to say that to get to that level, it now requires me to be a different person. And it might sound harsh, but it's complete truth. You're going to have to change everything, your habits, your lifestyle, and realize that if you got to go to the next stage, you have to make that decision. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and it's also realizing that, like, we're not Matt Fraser. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Like, I remember watching something with him talking about like living in his parents' basement where he had a gym set up, full-time athlete, sponsored, lives at home, partner cooking all his meals, turning down social occasions that would take him out of his training cycle. And generally, like, the average CrossFitter that wants to compete has a full-time, like, at our level or national level, like, has a full-time job or has a job. Probably, I think, isn't having all their meals cooked for them, probably doesn't have a fully kitted out home gym. So it's understanding that sacrifices need to be made, but then being realistic with it. Like, you're not able to do what these elite athletes can do. Probably, like, there'll always be like phenomenal, like, outliers and freaks, and at some point there will be a new Matt Fraser coming out of somewhere. But finding what you can sacrifice, but being realistic as well with what you can sacrifice.
Yeah, completely. And it's worth mentioning that, look, these guys are going to be doing it right now. So if they're already that many hours ahead of you, they're going to be putting in the hours every day. So unless you match it or go above it, you'll never catch them up. So it's just a decision to know that it's not just going to be, oh, next year I'm going to get to the games. It's just not going to happen, and it just won't happen. We're talking about professional sport here. It's like saying you want to go and play like professional football. It's probably not going to happen. So it's just having that realization. If you want to get to the next level, you're going to have to sacrifice some things. But cool. I think we've helped, probably a broad spectrum of people there. Hopefully, anyway. Maybe they'll look at our advice and be like, "No, I'll do it my way," which is absolutely cool. Do what you like. There is one thing that we haven't really touched on. We spoke a lot about the actual mechanics of training and adaptation and things like that and stimulus. What about the psychological things? I'm curious to know, after 12 years, how you stay motivated to keep training every day. You know, you get to the gym, you got to do a 2-hour session, you got to lift some weight, and then you compete in, you know, what, yeah, because I get this thought quite often, but how do you stay motivated?
Yeah, it's such a great question because, like, again, in 12 years of CrossFit, I've seen like people that I trained with at the start were like the biggest advocates for the sport and like loved it. Like, not fall by the wayside, but just move into other interests. Like, the classic thing of all the people that I used to do CrossFit with now is if they were good at endurance, maybe they've gone to high rocks or triathlons or marathons, half marathons. There's a classic like CrossFit crossover with like MMA and jiu-jitsu, which is a big one, which seems to happen quite a lot. And then I guess the smaller percentages of people maybe go into like weightlifting and things like that. So yeah, you're totally right. I think number one is that like, I just, it sounds really cheesy, but I just fucking love CrossFit. I just love the training aspect of it. Like, I love the fact that the whole ethos from day one of like out lift a runner, out run a lifter, like that whole kind of creating. I think Ben Smith talks about it. Like, his gym's called like CrossFit Krypton because it was like CrossFit was like creating like a Superman, if that makes sense. Like, you want to be good at everything, and you want to be this like best part of all sports and all training methodologies, and be able to turn your hand to like any task. But motivation is an interesting one. Like, day to day, like I'm a highly competitive person, so I've normally got a competition in the diary, like in the future, and that's what keeps me going. It's definitely changed in that 10 years ago, 8 years ago, I was entering something like every month, and my body was probably ruined. Although in my mid 20s, I could take it, where in my mid 30s, it's very different. But I've just come off a competition last weekend. I've got one in the diary, like steadily spaced apart, but I kind of have my season planned, if that makes sense. So I've got a 3-person competition in December. I'll have a 12-man competition at Sid Origins in February. So 3-month gaps, like big sensible gaps between them. But I know that the thing that I enjoy is like, from my rugby days, like the community aspect, the thrill of competing, like wanting to be on the floor and like show people what I can do is a big motivating factor for me. And I guess like these days you can enter all different types of competitions. Like I mentioned to you a minute ago about there being this, if you want to compete every weekend you can, but there's thousands of different types of competitions. Like, high rocks is very much not for me at all, but I know a lot of people that are branching out to that because they want to do more aerobic stuff. In the last year, I've done a couple of weightlifting competitions just to like have a bit of fun and get on the platform and try something new. I did a high rocks, didn't, like I said, didn't enjoy it, but like it was something to train for, and it made me definitely pick up my aerobic system. So there's so much more you can do, and for me, the motivation is mainly like competition based, and then just wanting to be better. Like, I rocked up to the competition on the weekend. Didn't know this certain person was competing, but it was a guy that I trained with like literally 10 years ago. We rocked up to the same competition. Really cool just to catch up and compete together and throw down. And as cheesy as it is, the community aspect still gets to me. So yeah, I guess it's not just competitive nature and still wanting to like for me it's like squeezing every last bit out of my training and my body. Like, yes, I'm aware I'm getting older, and at some point there's going to be a relationship where my numbers won't increase. Haven't got there yet, touch wood, but when that day comes, I'll maybe change my motivation or do something different.
Yeah, love that. And I would say the same things. I would say, if you're, first off, for me personally, yeah, I love it. I love being able to do everything and just turn your hand. You know, like we're approaching 40 and still like just being able to do everything. It's just a great thing to have, and your health is everything. You know, I don't want to just start reading off these CrossFit original quotes, but really it does boil down to the basic of normal CrossFit, which is just being healthy. And I think it just, you just feel better if you've ever gone. if you do what we do and you train every day and you do this sort of thing all the time, when you stop doing it, you notice it, and your mental health is affected because your brain's connected to your body, and if your body's not working, things start taking a toll. And I don't know how people go around without training, to be honest. Um,
Yeah,
in terms of competing at a high level, that can take its toll, and I've certainly been in places where I've felt the need to step away for a bit. But what puts it back on a plate, like you just said there, is one, putting things in the diary and having that thought of, I need to be prepared for this, because you've got a certain amount of pride, or maybe you're doing a team event, you don't want to let a team down. So you've got that sort of accountability there that holds you. I think training with other people, like you just said there, is like a game changer. Like getting yourself in a community just makes it so much more enjoyable, because if there's a hard workout and it sucks, when you experience suckage together, there's something about doing something in adversity that brings a
yeah,
team, like you just feel great. And I don't know, maybe it's a human being thing, but if you're just sat in a garage trying to work hard all the time on a rower, you ain't probably gonna last very long before you start, the motivation does start taking its toll on you. So yeah, definitely, I would say definitely those three things is the ones. Yeah, I love them, mate. I'm conscious now of your time, mate. So I'm going to ask just a couple more questions, and then we'll call it a day, because I know you've given up an hour for me already. Um, the next one is basically, is there anything you've purchased in the last 12 to 24 months that you've been like, oh shit, why wasn't I using this, or why wasn't I doing this? I'm talking about training specifically. Like, why wasn't I aware of this 2 years ago? Is there anything that comes to mind?
yeah. Do you know what? I thought about this question, and there probably isn't. I remember when I was younger, I tried everything because you generally think there will be something. Oh, the elite athletes are doing like something different to me. They're doing something special, like I'm trying to think, like, again, going back to the CrossFit content that I consumed was like Rich Froning eating like peanut butter out of a Tupperware, and peanut butter and jam, and like milk from a fridge. And
Yeah,
I think I remember Matt Fraser did an interview where he talked about beta alanine once, and then like everyone for the next 3 months, every single person was like having face tingles because they all bought beta alanine because Matt Fraser said dropped in the interview. Probably as like a joke, right? But yeah, I think the longer and longer I'm in the game, the more almost like the less stuff I use, if that makes sense. Like my supplement list when I was in my 20s was like huge monthly bill, and now I'm just whittled it down to like a couple of things. I have like my gym bag. I try and think of the things that I take to the gym. Like my gym bag has lifters, has knee sleeves, has a belt, but I'm very adamant to like not use them unless I'm at 85, 90% plus. Like you don't need to start chucking them on for empty barbell work. Like the thing that I use the most are like gymnastic grips and thumb tape, but I'm very much like a minimal trainer. Like I don't have like a Whoop band. I'm not have a thing that tells me my recovery, because I think it was probably more detriment than benefit most of the time. And yeah, I remember having a laundry list of things when I was younger that I just have kind of steadily got rid of because you realize that actually you don't need it. I'd have supplements, then I'd forget to buy a certain one for a month or two and be like, well, I actually feel exactly the same without it. So what's the point in buying it again?
yeah,
The only thing that like when I think of training wise, like I was very lucky in like, I know lockdowns are specific situations, not common, but I owned a bike erg. And just for, I think if you're someone that cannot get to a gym often, having something at home that's small and compact, and I think the bike erg to me is like my favorite bit of kit ever. Had it for 3-4 years, and just if my life was so busy that I couldn't make the gym, I couldn't figure out training, I plot myself on that, do some sprints, do some cardio. Loved it. I don't own it anymore because I actually live really close to the gym that I train at, but that I feel like game changers, it's probably just that. Like I don't think you probably need less of the fancy stuff than you think you do. It's my personal opinion about it anyway.
yeah, yeah. I was racking my head there to think if there was anything significant. Um, it might sound superficial, but I for so long I held out wearing vests at the gym. And unfortunately, I work in a military establishment, and I'm mostly trained now, and we can't really go skins. So I definitely say that the freedom and less restriction, oddly as it sounds, is actually, there's a pro there. If you're wearing t-shirts, I say, because that's what Froning used to wear, and I used to just fucking follow everything Froning did. Um, I'd wear a vest or cut your sleeves off. Also, like the shorts, we used to wear like these animal board shorts, like back in the day. You couldn't buy CrossFit. CrossFit shorts wasn't a thing. You Googled it and it was like UFC. Now they've got like split, but the better model now is to actually wear shorter shorts, and it just means they don't ride up, and they're just better. So I'd say those two, and then like you just said there, for so long I neglected zone two, long ass zone two training. I just didn't accept it. I was like, nah, it's high intensity interval training. Um, game changer. So I got a turbo in my, like, literally behind me now in my dining room, because I was thinking, well, if I'm just sat there watching TV anyway, I might as well just sit on the bike. So now I couldn't tell you how many miles I've done on it, but I go on there at least 3 times a week, and sometimes it's not a hard session. However, saying that, if I haven't been able to train for whatever reason, it's just great to have that in your living room and just be like, right, I'm going to bang out some intervals. And I've tried Swift, and they're all about the same. So I'm not going to advocate for one or the other, because they all do the same thing. But definitely find one of the programs, do some low zone 2 work for an hour, and it will change your performance in the gym. As crazy as that sounds. And if you're just watching TV, why not? It's using that time. That's what I'd say. You just said the biker, which was funny to me because it's kind of the same thing. Would you agree? Have you seen that?
Sorry?
Have you seen those changes from using the bike?
Yeah, definitely. Like I exactly the same as you. Like early days of CrossFit was intensity, like kill yourself, like Pukey the Clown, all these like memes of like you should be lying on the floor face up in a puddle of your own sweat, like sweat angel photos and all that stuff. And actually, for longevity, like you said, and for like aerobic capacity, like low and slow is great. I probably do so much more zone 2 and easy, like lower heart rate rowing, skiing, biking than ever now, which might come with I'm not sure if it's either an age thing or like a knowledge thing, probably a little bit of both. But yeah, the benefits are huge for recovery as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm conscious of your time. What's next for you then? You said you're doing triple threat, right? I'm guessing that's the one. And then anything else scheduled doing? Strength in depth?
So yeah, that's it. So Sid Triple Threat in December, team of 3. Quite a fun one because you can pick and choose your competitions. So like, I trained quite hard for Marbella, which was individual. I had peaked for it, and like my whole training cycle was based about this competition. Deloading currently, and then Triple Threat is more fun. It's me and my 2 pals. I'm not gonna like peak so much for it. I'm just treating it as like something to do on a weekend as like a bit of fun, and that's important to remember. Like, this is going back to a point we've already said, but competitions can just be for fun. Like, you don't have to put so much pressure on yourself to get high finishes, and that's something that I definitely used to do. So I'll be training through Triple Threat and just doing it as like a kind of fun weekend out with my pals. And then, trying to peak for Sid Origins, which is team of 12, which is just really unique in the UK scene. I think there's nothing like it, where you get 12 people and like you pick and choose who goes out for what workout. Very tactical, really fun. It'll be my sixth year at Sid if we qualify, which touch wood we do. And yeah, just it's for me, that's like one of the competitions in my diary every year that I'm like, yeah, Sid Origins goes straight in just because it's so like fun and good. Like you said, it's like that community suckage with like, all your friends, like all 12 of you going in hard together, and they're my next 2.
Amazing, mate. And I'll see you there. Not at the Triple Threat, but definitely the Origins. Perfect, mate. I'll leave it there. It's great to chat to you. I think this will be highly valuable to most people who are in the functional fitness world. I certainly have taken some points from it. And just really appreciate your time, mate, for the hour. Thank you.
Anytime, no worries.
All right. Cheers, buddy. Take care, mate. See you later.